Well, good day, everybody. My name is Jerry Stoffen. My wife and I live on 170 acres in Scott County. Our farmland is in CRP, timber, and pasture at this time. In 2022, my late dad called and told us there was a map in the Quad City Times showing Wolf Carbon Solutions CO2 pipeline route through Scott County. My wife and I got a newspaper, and it sure looked like the pipeline was coming through our farm. We attended the first IUB meeting in Davenport, but still couldn't get detailed information of the pipeline route until we spoke directly to a Wolf Carbon land acquisition agent. We located the agent that was handling easement sale and lobby right after the IUB meeting. Land agent gave us the hard sell about how lucrative it would be to sell Wolf an easement. All this chatter was wearing on us, but he finally handed over a map of a pipeline coming through our property. We were disappointed. This wasn't the first time a private company was trying to acquire easements to cut through our home. About 10 years prior, our neighbors and us fought against the Rock Island Clean Line project, a high voltage DC transmission line headed to Morris, Illinois. A couple of neighbors sold easements to that project, but the majority stood strong and that project folded. We knew we didn't want the CO2 pipeline coming through our property. We also knew this project was about more than a private company wanting to cut our farm in two with a dish and leave us with land that will never be the same. It was about creating a lifeline for ethanol and using our taxpayer dollars to do so. Ethanol was meant to be a bridge fuel from oil to maybe electric vehicles, hydrogen fuel cells, whatever was cleaner for the environment. Instead, Iowa's landscape was changed to produce corn and more corn. My wife and I were concerned about all environmental impacts of the CO2 pipeline, including propping up intense agricultural practices that incentivizes production over land stewardship. The injection of CO2 deep into the earth to sequester carbon is unproven technology that is a little sketchy to say the least. Pumping of billions of gallons of water from our aquifers each year to supply cooling systems for the pipeline, as well as the pollution of aquifers, seismic tremors, and wellhead leakage that would just release CO2 back into the atmosphere. Fortunately, we weren't alone in our concerns. Thousands of Iowans came together to fight these projects, and we stopped both Wolf Carbon Solutions and Navigator CO2 Ventures' proposed CO2 pipelines. There were other Iowans across the state who are still fighting Summit Carbon Solutions CO2 pipelines 4 years after the initial application. My wife and I feel if Summit gets to use eminent domain in central and western Iowa, eastern Iowa will better be ready for Summit land agents knocking on our doors. When John Norwood ran for Secretary of Agriculture 4 years ago, he had a great saying: Iowa's agriculture is like a giant battleship that cannot make a sharp turn. It must make a wide, slow turn so the ship can stay upright. Massive corporations like Archer Daniels Midland, BlackRock Global, and Summit Carbon Solutions are behind the CO2 pipelines we've seen in Iowa. These corporations have this propaganda of CO2 pipeline will drive forward our farm economy. Without the pipeline, we will not need your corn. With the pipeline, we will continue to see not only the degradation of our soil and water, but more farmers going under. As Secretary of Agriculture, would you support the Iowans still fighting Summit CO2 pipeline? And how would you address our dependence on ethanol while working to make sure farmers can make a living?
So if you read my material, I've been against the pipelines from day one. I'm against the eminent domain. And so let's back up a little bit. With ethanol, they've needed this designation as an advanced biofuel from EPA to be eligible for carbon credits. And to be an advanced biofuel, you have to demonstrate that you're releasing 50% less greenhouse gas versus regular petroleum. Ethanol has not been able to get there, okay? They haven't been able to get there, and so to get the advanced biofuel designation, They have to have this pipeline, or they're not going to get that, and the death of ethanol is going to come more quickly. Nonetheless, the writing is on the wall here. The demand for liquid fuels in the United States is declining. There's just no doubt about that, and it's going to continue to decline. So why should the taxpayer participate in this massive infrastructure project?
Right.
Right? It's crazy. It's insanity.
Right.
Why we're doing this. If Summit or somebody else wants to try to build a pipeline, and zigzag it where they can, putting it where willing landowners will let it go, well, okay. But why should we, facilitate that? What's the public good here? Eminent domain is supposed to produce a public good.
Right.
What's the public good here by this pipeline? It's private gain with no public good. This should not happen. I am adamant about that. And so, again, this comes back to the whole thing with ethanol. This is a life raft for ethanol. It's time to think about something different. And I would say, look at West Virginia. They clung to coal to the bitter end, right? They clung to coal to the bitter end. The writing was on the wall 30 years ago that coal was dying. They wouldn't let go. And look what happened. They lost a third of their population. It's the poorest state in the country. It's time for us to plan now for this retreat from ethanol. We should not, as a public, be participating in construction of new infrastructure for the ethanol industry, and I'm very adamant about that.
Yeah.